Yeah, so we're going to segue now into our second discussion here. As we were just talking about, Live Nation's kind of cornered the market. Live shows, underground music with all these venues closing in all of these cities is suffering a tough thing. And so that just brought up something to me that I think. So I think this goes a little deeper, and it's what we're going to talk about here. So Billy Corgan, obviously famously known as the main man for legendary grunge outfit Smashing Pumpkins, stated on his podcast, "The Magnificent Others," it's called. Recently, he said that he thinks that MTV and the CIA colluded to derail rock and roll and replace it with hip hop and rap. And I think, and I'll say it overtly. This is what he says here. I'll quote on what he says in his podcast. He says, "I think, and I will say it overtly, I think that rock has been purposely dialed down in the culture. If you were at MTV or around MTV in 97 or 98, suddenly they decided rock was out when rock was still very, very high up in the thing, and it was replaced by a rap," right? He said, "Their standards and practices immediately shifted. Some people assert that the CIA was involved in all that, again, above my pay grade, but I saw it happen. I did witness it happen." Now, first thing I said to myself when I saw that statement was kind of, it's about time that someone really had the cojones here to come out and say what I think a lot of us have seen. And I'm not talking necessarily if you want to, if you're the quote unquote conspiracy type of person, which listen, I kind of am myself. I ain't gonna lie. This is something that we all have been talking about. But a lot of us have been talking about for some time. Was all of a sudden in the late 90s, early 2000s, boom, rock was, they said it was dead. I wouldn't say it was dead. It was just not promoted and not developed anymore. And we saw the labels really turn 1,000% right to rap and hip hop on MTV, and essentially just stopped really, investing time, money, all that resources into bands, into rock bands and rock musicians becoming prevalent in our culture, musical culture, and it went completely 1,000% hip hop. Now, what do you think about what Corgan said, Eric? Give us your take on that.
1,000% right. I love that he validates what many people have been saying, but he's got a huge platform, and he's a great host, by the way. Love watching his interviews, and I have more respect for him and seeing how kind of on the level and into stuff that you and I are into as well, because he was an alternative rock guy. That's a different culture completely.
Yep.
But then he talks a lot about going to the same shows, being brought up on some of the same bands, interviews Stephen Pearcy, has a lot of respect for that guy. Talks about getting pumped up and jamming out to Rat. It's so fucking cool to hear that. So I think he does a great job. He's had a lot of maybe it's his Chicago in him where he's not as LA and not as with the narrative. He has spoken up and said things in the past that were against the grain. And so I love hearing it, but it's something I've been on this page for a long time, and probably at least 5-10 years ago, I believe it was Ice Cube that said that the industry guys, was it the producers or was it the label heads, but that the artists were being told to glorify violence and theft. It was being pushed, and he said literally it was to fill up the prisons. And I think, and then I'm real into a guy named Mike Benz. Have you seen any of his podcasts on YouTube?
I haven't.
He's awesome, and he has some incredible. Probably this is where, because I heard Mike Benz's take on it before Billy's. Okay. I almost feel like that got Billy on that tangent. He's got his thing. He talks about it, and that's how things go. But he breaks it down he's like a professor of this shit about U.S. aid and these government programs that finance art for influence and do revolutionary stuff. And it's it becomes too much, man. It's too heavy. It's really sad because it kind of it takes away from things that you value and you love. Because I'll tell you this, from touring, there's a few times, these weird instances where we'd be playing a club and it'd be whatever metal band I was in, and we'd be in a hip hop environment, and sometimes even hip hop artists, and be this strange like dual bill. And it's just rarely, because normally the two cultures don't really jive or mix. But like we hung out, we partied with them, you know, and they'd be like going out of their way of talking about how much they love like Stevie Ray Vaughan and like and Metallica, and like, so I was hanging with these guys. What I'm getting at is I know that some of these dudes like are really passionate about it. So I can shit on hip hop all day and everything about it, but I know that people really are into that as much as you and I are into fucking metal, right? And so anyway, it really takes away from like something that you're into to think that that the fucking CIA, or it could be the man, it could be anybody, you know, like, well, as you get older, you realize that like the whole concept of bosses, you know, that it could just be your boss, your manager, or their boss. So who's their boss? That keeps going up the chain. And like answering to somebody, or realizing that you got a bunch of friends who can't say certain things in public because they'll lose their job. And that changes from time to time, depending on what the hot issue is, you know. Doesn't mean that they're a bad person, but there was a time where even questioning COVID could get you you know, a lot of consequences, right? Totally. And I think that's a really milk toast thing, you know, especially now that so much has come out. But so the hot buttons can change, but like so many people are like are on a leash, you know, to different degrees. Oh yeah. And that includes musicians, unfortunately, and all our people that we think are such fucking badasses are answer to a boss, like in a sense that they'll just get fucking dropped. That all of a sudden, what happened to this band? Oh yeah, all their financing evaporated, you know. And it's like people can talk about the numbers. Numbers can be manipulated and explained a different way, but all of a sudden, their budget just disappeared. Now, how about this other band that does the same? It's like the same thing, the same product. It's Coke and Pepsi, right? But they're fucking killing it. Well, yeah, they still have their budget. They're still like when they book a tour, they have transportation and they have a place to sleep, and like, you know, they get fed, unlike Incantation, right?
Yeah.
So like, and then you see the true like underground artists and shit, and they're just fucking, they got no budget, and like their message goes much smaller because it doesn't get spread. And so you realize that like, oh my God, maybe, and I'm 1,000%. There's these massive budgets, and there's these narrative, and these this social engineering is a fucking is a reality.
That's reality, man, no doubt. And they do it using music to do that. That's one of the things they use.
Absolutely. If you or I, wait, I'm pointing at you or I, we're born today, there's a good chance that we might even not get into metal. We might turn out completely different, because like, how do you even get into it? You know, it's like life throws things at you and you end up getting into, so you go down this path, right? You might not even get into it, you know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah.
So like,
no, I mean, agree 1,000%. Yeah.
So there's definitely agendas, but you know, once again, it's not always 1,000% nefarious, but it can be. And it can be like, hey, guess what? Rock is done. Or like, hey, we don't need to help out rock anymore. It's fine. It's on autopilot. But I do think that we really were lucky that like all the attention and all the artists and like the stars were aligned to make that happen. And it did happen. And it was fucking cool. And it was beautiful. And I've heard a lot of hip hop people saying that like their shot is kind of fading. Like a lot of them, because they don't tour. They don't sell merch. They don't like, I don't even know how they make money, because all their shit's streaming. And so
they
like
don't make much money. Yeah.
Everyone's like, well, you don't make money on streaming. Once again, those numbers are all being manipulated. Like all the money, you know,
well, that too
can go somewhere. You go to one guy and not the other, right?
Yeah.
Like the second that they flip on that, and then it goes back to like, I call it HBO music, that like indie coffee house music that they do, or that like fucking, it could be anything that they just switch gears to, and they're like, whoa, what happened? Like all our guys don't have any budget anymore. But Billy Corgan is badass, and he is like Smashing Pumpkin is about as mainstream as it gets, you know, for rock, you know, like, so
that's
for
what's
me,
great about him to say this. Yeah. I mean, it's great because, you know, reading the article, you know, Rolling Stone, which to me is the equivalent of the music version of the New York Times, pretty much.
yeah, yes,
Yeah, of course. Now, if you read this article that they write about, you know, about Billy, they really go after him like they took it personal that he even said this. Now, and that's what he says, and that's why I think it's much more intriguing and even believable if you ask me, because why are they so offended, you know, as a publication that this guy had this to say? I mean, they went on to make it sound like he's this crazy nut job, which to
yes,
me means that he hit a nerve with the establishment. This is what they said. I'll just give you one quote here. They said MTV's programming, like that of most TV stations, has always been more or less dictated by advertising, which, okay, yes, no doubt. They talked about this is why they had, you know, shows like Ridiculousness or Yo Mama, all those stupid things. Now, he said to sell commercials, Viacom, which, you know, was obviously that owned MTV, needed to broadcast music videos that attracted consumers between the ages of 12 and 24. And that meant constantly changing with the times. And so they basically go on to basically say that Smashing Pumpkins music, they almost criticized basically the band and Billy, saying their music just wasn't good at that point, which and I agree with that. They really kind of lost it at that point. But here's the thing is Corgan is talking about rock being phased out in general. He's not talking about Smashing Pumpkins, the band, like we were. So, and I just think here they also kind of contradict themselves because they say here, again, that basically the consumers between, you know, they say basically it meant constantly changing with the times. Well, here's my argument to that. Okay, if that is true, and this was about 20 to 25 years ago, well, then how come really the music, the pop music that we see now for the last 20 to 25 years hasn't changed? That's the thing. Even metal, right? What have we been seeing in metal for the last 20 to 25 years? The same thing. Metalcore, deathcore. There's been nothing new in the last 20. They've been and these new bands, the Spirit Boxes and all this stuff, sound the same as those bands that were coming out 20 years ago.
right.
And same with rap and hip hop. You don't see nothing with that either. It's all mumble rap and so forth. So they kind of just contradicted themselves right there. Now, I'm going to bring up a quote here from this guy. He's a filmmaker. His name is Joseph Kahn. Okay. So his videography includes, you know, videos by Brandy and Monica, you know, all those pop artists, including, you know, he also did Rob Zombie. And this is his theory of why about rock music. He said rock died when it separated itself now from sex. He said, I did a video for a huge rock band, and they argued over the quote unquote male gaze that music is ultimately driven by horny teenagers and they fled to rap. Now, my thing is I think it's also not, I mean, that has, I think he has a point there, but it's also where rap and metal even has become very feminized, you know, where back in the day it wasn't. I mean, it was one thing to be inclusive, but now it's sort of like, hey, we can't just have a couple of bands that have female vocals. We've got to have a band. You ain't going to get popular unless you have. It's an identity thing now. Unless you have someone who's a certain race or someone who's a certain gender. You know. Go ahead.
Yeah, DEI politics, DEI
totally.
Disney, right?
Yep.
Yeah, sure. Like the guy from Space Lord, motherfucker,
Massive Magnet. Yeah,
he said the same thing back, like in the 2000s. They always go back to it, and there's a bit of it. I think that's a cliche. Like, sure, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I mean, that's what makes the headlines, dude, and that'll never change. That people love the stories. You get the ears perked, you know. The only other thing is like murder and crime. People love that shit too. It's just like you very quickly go to prison for that. And but like there's so many angles. I think it's just bullshit on so many ends. Billy Corgan is 1,000% right. Rolling Stone is the fucking enemy. They might be the goddamn CIA.
You're right. Well, I'll tell you, read this article. It sounds like they are, because they took it so personally and they went at him so personally about his band stinks and he stinks that you almost have to think that they are probably connected. That's why they came out with this hit piece. Exactly.
And you look at so many of these things where there are some people in this industry that do get paid money that it doesn't, like, where's that money coming from? Where's your budget? Where's your salary coming from? That doesn't make sense. And that could be politics. Like, why is this fucking person making $400,000 a year? That's insane. But like in the music industry, where you're lucky to make fucking $1,000 on anything, like you got a budget, you're a journalist, there's no money. People do that for free. People had to quit. So you just start looking like, where's this money coming from? But yeah, and then it's over and over, and all of the establishments, that could be the LA Times, they all share the same politics. They all look the same. They all like the same band. They're the same people. They're just different people. They're fucking hipsters. They're fucking nerds. They're people that I could never get along with. They run everything, and they take it over too. Like these fucking dorks. They take over metal, and then they get in these like positions of power, basically, because authority almost gives them too much respect. But they become bosses, if you will. And they decide yes or no. They can decide, I like this tour, get this band off it. I don't like them. They have a lot, like even stuff that doesn't pay money, it pays in life experience. Being able to shape the world is pretty cool, actually. I would love to be able to be in charge of a lot of shit. I'm not. I would love to. I don't even need to be paid. I would love to just fucking just throw out orders and make things the way that they are. So that's pretty cool. And they have, this all comes down to money, because you can't do it without just the foundation. So Billy Corgan's 1,000% right. Rolling Stone is the enemy, and the CIA funds a lot of this shit, and they make the budget for it. Really quickly, I will say that, I would love a budget. I'd love a budget for anything, man. I'd love a government grant. Give me that fucking money to do some cool shit, So,
sure, man.
Like, dude, that's, and for a while, maybe our people, maybe all the people that we like, maybe the whole reason why they were floating and stuff, because when you look at these numbers and the expenses, like maybe that's where the money was coming from. But these motherfuckers did not have to have a job. These guys got to show rehearsal at 2 p.m., sleep off their hangovers, rehearse for 4 or 6 hours,
totally
go to the be rock stars, wake up the next day at noon, show up to rehearsal at 2 p.m., shit out an album once a fucking year, make some great stuff. They show up and they're working with talented producers. Don't forget, those guys were artists themselves.
Oh yeah,
work with them. It was kind of like, also you realize, like, I was listening to the dude that did Peace Sells, or especially a lot of that vintage metal when metal wasn't established.
Randy Burns.
Yes, like a Full and Bloom like interview or something like it. So many of these like guys where metal was just this new thing, and they were like, they had a classic rock background, and like they captured it, but like these guys were all badasses, and they're all, none of them had to work fucking day jobs, that and I guess maybe it was all funded by USAID.
It could be. Look at and you said something before. To echo on is about people. It's a lot of this is controlled, and not so much authority, but the people who make decisions are a bunch of these dorks. And it's true. Listen, as someone who's worked at labels and so forth, that was the thing I first noticed when I would go and work at these labels. I was there to just support the bands, and I loved it. I just loved the vibe of this thing. But they hated me, and that's exactly what it is, because for one, they were afraid you were going to come in and take their job. Because if you're passionate and your shit, then they're definitely coming to take your job. That's what they were scared of. Everywhere I went, they weren't. They were, and what it was is, I always said, a lot of these people you see that are behind the scenes, these are guys, and even I guess women too, that want to be rock stars, but they don't have the chops as musicians or no skills, musical skills. So they decide they want to be a rock star behind the scene. And if they get a little power, they get a little gatekeeping, stuff. They will ride that. And some of these guys, you look at some of these guys at these publications, the Metal Injections and so forth, just go and take a look at some of these guys. And again, look, I'm not like, it's not about, I'm not trying to make fun of people's who they are. You can listen, I'm a dork in my own right too, but not like these guys. These guys are literally like hateful, spiteful people that they did. I came in, I experienced at Roadrunner Records. I remember, busting my ass and making a name for myself there as an intern. And this guy I worked under two guys. One guy was Corey Brennan, who now runs the management company for Megadeth and Slipknot and all of them. He was an awesome dude, a great guy. The other guy was this guy, Paul Rester, who's a complete asshole. He knew nothing about the music and these bands on Roadrunner. I was, I knew them all. I was so passionate about them. He thought I was trying to come take his job. And then in the end, he basically tried to say he didn't know who it was when I had used him as a reference and all this shit. So you have a lot of these dorks that behind the scenes that they're not really there for the band so much as they are for themselves to promote themselves. And it's unfortunate. And I think, like you said, I think a lot of these guys are some of the guys that have the quote unquote power behind the scenes too, that are doing what we're seeing that's going on, unfortunately.
They do. I got to say one thing is that they are the enemy, but they are who they are. And at some point you realize you quit trying to work for the enemy and kissing these motherfuckers' ass, because they're the ones that can green light your gig, right? But then you realize you guys are never going to green light anything I do or anything I want to do. And there's the other guys that'll change what they want to do, so it gets greenlit, right?
Exactly.
So that would be like the corporate way of doing things, which at some point reality comes in here. But what I'm trying to say is, at some point, they are who they are, and they have every right to fucking be shitty people and push shitty things, lame fucking tired. I swear it's like yuppie metal. It looks like you remember? Oh god, there's a clothes company called like Z Cavarici and IOU, and I'm just thinking about these stores of like there's a whole, like people like that. It's that type of metal. It's IOU metal, Disney metal, what have you, But like it's up to, at the same time, everyone wants to work for them, and so they got the foundation, but it's like you don't get to do that. So that's like the big crossroads, That's why I really love what you guys are, like you and Chris, and like just the podcast that I listen to. That's Against the Grain. That's an example of doing it your own way and not catering to the fucking enemy, And so that's that. Fuck Rolling Stone.
Yeah, I agree. Fuck Rolling Stone.